I'm running through the hospital corridor, and the fluorescent lights are flickering like something's about to go horribly wrong. My shoes squeak against the linoleum, my breath comes in sharp gasps, and all I can think is, please, God, let Daniel be okay. The call came 2 hours ago. Car accident, Highway 9, critical condition, brain trauma. And now I'm sprinting toward the back entrance of St. Jude's Hospital, my heart pounding so hard I can taste metal in my mouth. I don't notice how empty this wing is, how the lights are dimmer here, how there's no sound except my footsteps echoing off cold walls. Dr. Vanesa Rodriguez meets me in the hallway, and she looks concerned, professional, perfect. She's holding a tablet with x-rays, and the words coming out of her mouth make my world collapse. Mrs. Whitmore, your husband's brain is swelling. We need an experimental surgery within the hour, or he dies. It's $500,000. Sign this power of attorney now to transfer the funds. My hands shake as I reach for the pen. I'm about to sign when I feel it. A grip on my wrist. A nurse I've never seen before. Her name tag says, Joy. And her eyes are screaming, don't. Everything happens in seconds. Joy knocks over a metal tray. The crash echoes, and she's pulling me backward into a maintenance corridor, dragging me up a ladder into a ventilation shaft. I'm about to scream when she points down through a grate in the floor. And that's when I see him, Daniel, my husband, sitting up on the gurney, laughing, eating a sandwich, no blood, no bandages. Perfectly fine. He leans over and kisses Dr. Vanesa, and I watch my marriage shatter through a metal grate. Joy's recording on her phone, the audio amplified. Daniel's voice comes through. Did the idiot sign yet? I'm done pretending I can stand that controlling bitch. Vanessa laughs. Once she takes the sedative, her heart stops in 2 minutes. Stress-induced cardiac arrest. No one will question it. Daniel grins. Good. The second her money hits my account, I'm free. They're laughing about my murder. Actually laughing. And something inside me doesn't break. It snaps. Then it happens. Daniel jumps off the gurney, so excited he can barely contain himself. His shoe catches on spilled saline. His foot slides, his arms windmill, and his skull slams into the metal edge of the surgical table. Crack, not a movie sound, a real one. Wet, deep. Final. He crumples, seizing, legs kicking, and Vanessa's screaming his name. All I can think is, it's real now. Joy and I climb down. We walk into the room. Vanessa looks up, mascara streaking, hands bloody, and begs, help me. Call someone. I pull out my phone, but I don't call 911. I call hospital security, the police. I look at Vanessa and say coldly, you're the doctor, so work. Daniel's eyes stare at nothing, body twitching. The real medical team arrives, shoves Vanessa aside, intubates Daniel. A cop approaches. I hand over Joy's phone. It's all there, the confession, everything. They cuff Vanessa, and she's sobbing, saying it was all Daniel's idea. I don't even look at her. I follow the gurney carrying my husband to the real ICU. And that's when the doctor stops me. His face is grave. Mrs. Whitmore, we need to talk about your husband's condition. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything. And I realize right then, this nightmare, it's only just beginning. 2 hours earlier, I was sitting in my living room, staring at the divorce papers I'd hidden in my desk drawer for 3 months. I hadn't signed them yet. Couldn't bring myself to do it. Because despite everything, despite Daniel's gambling debts, despite the cold silences, despite the way he looked at me like I was his jailer instead of his wife, I still loved him. Or maybe I loved the memory of who he used to be. The man who proposed to me on a beach at sunset. The man who cried when my father died and left me everything. God, my father. He warned me about Daniel. Chloe, that boy loves your money more than he loves you. I didn't listen. I was so sure I could fix him, save him, love him enough to change him. The phone rang at 6:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock, waiting for Daniel to come home from wherever he'd been all day. The voice on the other end was distorted, mechanical, like something from a horror movie. Mrs. Whitmore, your husband's been in an accident? Highway 9, His car flipped. He's critical. You need to come to St. Jude's Hospital immediately. Back entrance. Hurry. The line went dead before I could ask questions. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone twice trying to grab my keys. All those divorce papers, all that anger, all those nights I'd laid awake resenting him, none of it mattered anymore. All I could think was, I can't lose him. Not like this. Not before I tell him I still care. I should have called 911. I should have called the hospital directly to verify. I should have done 1,000 things differently. But when someone tells you the person you love is dying, logic doesn't exist anymore. There's only panic. Only this primal need to get there, to see them, to hold their hand one last time. I grabbed my purse, my phone, and I was out the door in seconds. I didn't even lock it behind me. Didn't grab a coat even though the sky had turned that weird greenish-black color that means a storm's coming. I just ran to my car, my heart already breaking, already grieving, already drowning in guilt for every harsh word I'd ever said to him. I drove like a maniac through the storm that had blown in from nowhere, rain hammering my windshield, lightning splitting the sky. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head. This morning, he'd asked me for $50,000 to invest in a friend's business. I'd said no. Again. Because it wasn't a business. It was another poker game. Another scheme. Another lie. He'd slammed the door so hard the frame cracked. And now he was dying, and those were going to be my last words to him. No. I pressed the accelerator harder, my vision blurring with tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. The GPS led me to the back of St. Jude's, to a service entrance I'd never noticed before. And I ran inside without questioning why, without wondering why a critically injured patient would be brought to the back entrance. I was too desperate, too terrified, too blind to see the trap closing around me. The back entrance of St. Jude's Hospital was nothing like I expected. No chaos, no rushing nurses, no beeping machines or frantic voices yelling medical codes. Just silence. Long, empty corridors with flickering lights that buzzed like dying insects. My footsteps echoed too loudly, and somewhere in the back of my mind a tiny voice whispered, "This is wrong." But I shoved it down. Daniel was here, Daniel needed me. That's all that mattered. I followed the signs to Wing C, and with every turn, the hospital felt less like a place of healing and more like something abandoned. Paint peeling off the walls. Outdated equipment gathering dust in corners. A wheelchair with a broken wheel sitting in the middle of the hallway like someone just left it there years ago. Dr. Vanesa Rodriguez appeared so suddenly I actually gasped. She was stunning in that cold, sharp way, perfectly styled dark hair, expensive perfume that smelled like jasmine and money, a white coat so crisp it looked brand new. Mrs. Whitmore. Her voice was smooth, professional, concerned in all the right ways. "I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Your husband was brought in 20 minutes ago. The paramedics did everything they could, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head like words couldn't capture the tragedy. She led me into a small consultation room that smelled like bleach and fear, and I sat down in a plastic chair that was still warm, like someone had just been sitting there. Vanessa pulled up images on a tablet, X-rays that showed a skull with massive fractures, brain tissue swelling against the bone. "This is Daniel's scan," she said softly. "The impact was catastrophic." I couldn't breathe. I was staring at that image, at what I thought was my husband's shattered skull, and my whole body went numb. Vanessa kept talking, using words like intracranial pressure, and herniation, and irreversible damage. But all I heard was, "He's dying. He's dying. He's dying." Then she leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine with this intensity that should have been my first warning. "There's an experimental procedure. It's not FDA approved yet, but I've seen it work in cases like this. It involves decompressing the skull, removing a portion of bone to give the brain room to swell without causing death. But Mrs. Whitmore..." She paused, and I swear to God, there was something almost predatory in her expression. "Your insurance won't cover it. It's $500,000, out of pocket, and we need to operate within the hour, or there's no point. $500,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. I had it. My father's inheritance. The money I'd protected from Daniel's gambling, from his business opportunities, from every scheme his friends tried to rope him into. And now, the only thing standing between my husband and death was that money. Vanesa slid papers across the desk, legal documents that blurred together through my tears. This is an emergency power of attorney. It allows me to transfer funds from your account directly to the hospital for immediate treatment. All you have to do is sign here, and we can save him. Her pen was already in my hand. My fingers were wrapping around it. And somewhere deep in my gut, that tiny voice was screaming now, "Don't, don't, don't." My hand was trembling so badly the pen tip kept skittering across the paper without making contact. I could barely see through the tears, barely think through the panic crushing my chest like a vice. Sign here. Save Daniel. It was that simple, wasn't it? Vanesa was watching me with this patient, expectant look, like a cat watching a mouse inch closer to the trap. "Mrs. Whitmore, every second counts," she said gently, placing her hand over mine to steady it. Her skin was cold, ice cold, and that's when I felt it. Another hand, warm, firm, wrapping around my wrist and pulling the pen away. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Rodriguez, but I need to check Mrs. Whitmore's blood pressure first." The voice came from behind me, and I turned to see a nurse I didn't recognize. She was older, maybe mid-50s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her name tag said Joy Chen, RN, and she was already wrapping a blood pressure cuff around my arm with quick, efficient movements. Vanesa's face flickered with something, annoyance, anger, but it was gone in a second, replaced by professional understanding. "Of course, Joy. We don't want Mrs. Whitmore going into shock." Joy pumped the cuff tight around my bicep, so tight it actually hurt, and then she leaned in close to my ear, pretending to listen to my heartbeat. Her whisper was barely audible. "The X-ray is fake. Look at the date stamp. 1999. That's not your husband." My blood turned to ice. I wanted to look at the tablet again, wanted to verify what she'd just said, but Joy squeezed my arm in warning. She released the cuff and announced loudly, 160/95. "Doctor, she's hypertensive. I'd recommend a mild sedative before she signs anything." Vanesa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Excellent idea, Joy. I'll prepare something right now." She stood and walked to a medicine cabinet in the corner, her back to us, and that's when Joy moved. She accidentally knocked over a metal tray of instruments. The crash so loud it made me jump, made Vanesa spin around in alarm. And in that split second of chaos, Joy grabbed my hand and yanked me toward the door, hissing, "Run! Now!" We were in the corridor, and Joy was pulling me past the empty nurses and station, past the flickering lights, toward a door marked "Staff Only." I could hear Vanesa behind us, her heels clicking rapidly, her voice calling out, "Mrs. Whitmore, wait! Where are you going?" But Joy didn't stop. She shoved me through the door into what looked like a janitorial closet, cramped and dark and smelling like industrial cleaning solution. I was about to demand answers, about to scream, when Joy pressed her finger to her lips and pointed up. There was a metal grate in the ceiling, part of the ventilation system, and through it, I could see directly down into the room next door. Room 4, the operating room, where Daniel was supposedly dying. Joy pulled out her phone, opened some kind of audio app, and aimed it at the grate. "Watch," she whispered. "Just watch." And that's when my entire world exploded. Because through that grate, I saw Daniel, my husband, very much alive, sitting up on the gurney, unwrapping what looked like a deli sandwich, laughing at something Vanesa was saying as she walked back into the room. There was no blood, no bandages, no tubes or wires or any of the equipment you'd expect for someone with catastrophic brain trauma. He looked bored, annoyed, like he'd been waiting too long for a bus. And then Vanesa Rodriguez walked up to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. Not a peck, a real kiss. The kind of kiss that spoke of intimacy, of history, of something that had been going on for a very, very long time. I felt Joy's hand on my shoulder, keeping me upright, keeping me from collapsing, as I watched my husband betray me in ways I didn't even know were possible. Joy's phone was amplifying the audio from the room below, and Daniel's voice came through crystal clear. Jesus Christ, Vanesa, how much longer? My ass is numb from this gurney. He stretched his arms over his head, cracking his knuckles like he'd just finished a long shift at work. Vanesa laughed, running her fingers through his hair in a way that made my stomach turn. Just a few more minutes, baby. I gave her the whole traumatic brain injury speech. She was practically signing when that bitch Joy interrupted. Daniel's face twisted with irritation. Joy's always been a problem. You should have scheduled this on her day off. My hands were pressed against the metal grate, my nails digging into the cold steel, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was hearing. Vanesa pulled up a chair next to the gurney, crossing her legs, and I noticed for the first time how comfortable they looked together. How natural. This wasn't new. This wasn't some spontaneous affair. They'd done this before, planned together, schemed together, maybe even killed together. Once she signs that power of attorney, Vanesa continued, her voice matter-of-fact clinical, the $500,000 transfers automatically. Then I give her the sedative. She made air quotes with her fingers, and Daniel grinned. What's actually in it? Vanesa's smile was cold. Potassium chloride. Her heart will stop in under 2 minutes. I'll call it stress-induced cardiac arrest. Happens all the time to spouses in medical crisis. The death certificate will be signed before anyone asks questions. I felt bile rising in my throat. They were talking about murdering me like it was a goddamn grocery list. Like I was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved, a stepping stone to a bank account. Daniel sat up straighter, his eyes gleaming with something that looked like excitement. And you're sure no one will trace it back to us? No autopsy? No investigation? Vanesa waved her hand dismissively. I've done this twice before. The key is making sure the emotional context is perfect. Grieving widow arrives at hospital, sees her dying husband, has a panic attack, cardiac arrest, death. It's textbook trauma response. No one questions it. Twice before. Oh my God, this woman had murdered people. And Daniel knew. He'd known and he'd chosen her anyway. Chosen this plan, chosen my death over our marriage. Daniel leaned back against the gurney, staring at the ceiling with a satisfied smirk. You know what the best part is? I don't even have to pretend anymore. 3 years of acting like I gave a shit about Chloe's feelings, about her dead father's legacy, about being a good husband. He said those last words in a mocking tone that made my chest physically ache. I'm so sick of her controlling every dollar, questioning every purchase, looking at me like I'm some kind of failure. Well, guess what, Chloe? I'm about to be a very rich widower. And the second that money clears, I'm buying that Maserati I've had my eye on. And you and I, he reached for Vanesa's hand, are going to Bali for a month. Maybe longer. Vanesa leaned down and kissed him again, slower this time, deeper, and I had to look away. Joy was still recording everything, her face grim, professional, but I could see the anger in her eyes too. She'd suspected something. That's why she'd stopped me from signing. That's why she'd brought me here. She mouthed the words, "We need more evidence, more confession, more proof that would send them both to prison for life." So we waited, and Daniel kept talking, because men like him always do. Did you see her face when you showed her those fake x-rays? He laughed. Actually laughed. She was ready to sign over everything. God, she's so predictable. So desperate to play the good wife, even after everything I've put her through. It's pathetic. Vanesa nodded. That's what makes her the perfect victim. She loves you too much to see what's right in front of her. And right then, staring down through that grate at my husband and his mistress planning my murder, something inside me changed. Not broke, changed. The grief, the shock, the heartbreak, it all crystallized into something cold and sharp and focused. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg or plead or try to understand why. I was going to watch. I was going to wait. And I was going to make sure that every single word they said was captured, documented, and used to bury them both. Joy must have seen it in my face, because she nodded slightly, a grim smile on her lips. We were thinking the same thing. Let them talk. Let them confess. Let them hang themselves with their own words. Because karma was about to walk through that door, and it was wearing my face. Daniel checked his watch, and I could see the impatience written all over his face. All right, enough stalling. Go get her. Let's finish this. Vanesa stood up, smoothing her white coat, transforming back into the concerned, professional doctor like she was flipping a switch. Give me 5 minutes. I'll tell her you're crashing, that we need the signature immediately or you'll die. She'll sign. She turned toward the door, and I felt Joy tense beside me, ready to move, ready to intercept. But then Daniel called out, "Wait, come here first." Vanesa turned back, confused, and Daniel hopped off the gurney with a grin. "We should celebrate. This is it, baby. After tonight, we're set for life." He was practically bouncing on his feet. That same manic energy he got after a big poker win. That same arrogance. He pulled Vanesa into his arms, spinning her around like they were in some romantic movie. And she laughed. Genuinely laughed. In a way I'd never heard her laugh before. "Daniel, stop. We don't have time for this." But she was smiling, her guard completely down, and he dipped her dramatically, planting a kiss on her neck. "Just one victory dance," he said. "Then you can go kill my wife." The casual cruelty of those words, like I was already dead, like I'd never mattered at all. He pulled Vanesa upright and took a step back, still grinning, still riding that high of thinking he'd won. And that's when it happened. Daniel's left foot, in those expensive Italian leather shoes I'd bought him for our 2nd anniversary, came down on a puddle of saline solution that had dripped from an IV bag earlier. I saw it in slow motion. The way his soul lost traction, the way his ankle rolled, the way his arms shot out trying to grab something, anything. Vanesa reached for him, but she was too slow. His body weight shifted backward, momentum carrying him down, and the base of his skull connected with the sharp metal corner of the surgical instrument tray table. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Not a crack, not a thud. Something wet and crushing and absolutely final, like a watermelon splitting open, like bone giving way. Daniel's body hit the floor and immediately started seizing. Not the fake kind you see in movies. Real seizures. His legs kicked out in violent, jerky movements. His arms bent at unnatural angles. His eyes rolled back until only the whites showed, and foam started bubbling at the corners of his mouth. Vanesa screamed, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his body like she didn't know where to start. "Daniel! Daniel! Oh my God! Daniel!" She pressed her fingers to his neck, checking for a pulse, and I could see the exact moment she felt it. Weak, thready, irregular. He was dying. Actually dying this time. Not fake brain trauma from a staged accident. Real trauma from real karma. Blood pooled beneath his head, spreading across the white linoleum floor in a dark halo. Vanesa's hands were shaking so badly she could barely maintain pressure on the wound. She was a doctor, supposedly experienced, supposedly skilled enough to run elaborate insurance fraud schemes, but faced with an actual emergency. She was useless. "Someone help. I need help." She screamed at the empty room, at the abandoned wing of the hospital she'd chosen specifically because no one would interrupt. Joy looked at me, waiting for my signal, waiting to see what I wanted to do. And I realized something in that moment. I had a choice. I could save him. I could run down there, call for real help, maybe get him to surgery in time. Or I could wait, just a little longer. Let the universe finish what it started. I watched Daniel's body twitch and spasm, watched Vanesa's expensive white coat turn red with his blood, watched karma work in real time, and I felt nothing. No horror. No sympathy. No urge to help the man who'd planned to murder me for money 30 seconds ago. Joy whispered, "Chloe, we need to call this in. If he dies, and we were up here..." She was right. Legally, morally, we had to act. But I wanted them both to feel it first. Wanted Vanesa to understand what it meant to watch someone you love die. Wanted Daniel to suffer, even unconscious, even seizing, for what he'd tried to do to me. So I counted to 30 in my head. Slow, deliberate. Let them panic. Let them drown in the consequences of their own plan. And then, only then, I nodded to Joy. Now. Call them now. Joy and I climbed down from the ventilation shaft, our shoes hitting the floor with echoes that seemed too loud in the silence. I walked through that staff-only door and into room 4, and the look on Vanesa's face when she saw me was worth every second of pain I'd endured in the last 2 hours. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air, and her blood-covered hands froze over Daniel's body. You're supposed to be... She couldn't even finish the sentence. I pulled out my phone, the screen still recording, and held it up so she could see herself. Supposed to be dead. I finished for her. Yeah. Funny how plans change. Vanesa's brain was working overtime. I could see it in her eyes. She was calculating, strategizing, trying to find a lie that would work. She looked down at Daniel, at the blood pooling around his head, and then back at me with this desperate, pleading expression. Chloe, thank God you're here. Daniel, he had a post-mortem spasm. He fell. You have to help me. We need to get him to surgery. Her voice was shaking, tears streaming down her face. And if I hadn't just watched her plan my murder, I might have actually believed her. But I had. I'd seen everything. Heard everything. And now she was trying to gaslight me in real time, standing over my husband's body, covered in his blood, still trying to play the concerned doctor. I walked closer, slow and deliberate, until I was standing right over them both. Daniel's seizures had stopped, but his breathing was shallow, labored, making this horrible, wet, rattling sound. Vanesa grabbed my arm, leaving bloody handprints on my sleeve. Please, Chloe, help me lift him. We can still save him. I looked down at her hand on my arm, at the blood that was supposed to be mine, at this woman who'd kissed my husband and called me pathetic. And I smiled. Not a nice smile. A cold one. The kind of smile that makes people's blood run cold. You're a doctor, Vanesa, I said quietly. So, work. Show me those expert skills you were bragging about. The ones you used to kill 2 other people. Her face went white. Bone white. She knew. She knew I'd heard everything. Vanesa released my arm and scrambled backward, leaving Daniel on the floor, her survival instinct kicking in. You're confused, you're in shock. But Joy stepped forward then, holding up her phone. We have 43 minutes of recorded video and audio, Dr. Rodriguez. Every word, every confession, every detail of your plan to murder Mrs. Whitmore for insurance fraud. And the part where you admitted to doing this twice before, that's going to be very interesting to the FBI. Vanesa looked between us, trapped, cornered, and I watched her cycle through denial, anger, bargaining, all in the span of seconds. She tried one more time. Desperation makes people stupid. Chloe, please, you have to understand. Daniel made me do this. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him, he'd ruin my career. I'm a victim too. And oh my God, I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that surprised even me. You're a victim. You were planning which beach in Bali to visit after you murdered me. You called me pathetic. You kissed my husband and talked about buying a Maserati with my inheritance. So no, Vanesa, you're not a victim. You're just really, really bad at this. I pulled out my own phone and dialed 911, not the fake number they'd called me from, the real one. And I kept my eyes locked on hers the entire time I spoke. Yes, I need police and real medical emergency at St. Jude's Hospital, Wing C, Room 4. There's been an attempted murder and medical fraud. The perpetrator is still on scene. Vanesa made a break for the door, but Joy was faster. She'd positioned herself there, arms crossed, blocking the exit with the kind of calm authority that comes from 30 years of nursing. You're not going anywhere, doctor. You're going to stay right here and explain to the police why you have Mrs. Whitmore's husband's blood all over you, why this wing was closed off, and why those x-rays you showed her are from 1999. Vanesa's legs gave out. She literally crumpled to the floor, sobbing, makeup running down her face, the perfect facade completely shattered. And I stood there, watching her breakdown, feeling absolutely nothing. The woman who'd planned to kill me was crying at my feet, And all I could think was, good. Let her feel it. Let her drown in it. The real medical team arrived in under 4 minutes, and the difference was immediate. These weren't actors playing parts in a fake emergency. These were actual professionals who knew what the hell they were doing. A team of 4 paramedics rushed in with equipment, shouting medical codes I didn't understand, working on Daniel with the kind of precision that only comes from saving lives every single day. They intubated him in seconds, got an IV line started, strapped a cervical collar around his neck, and loaded him onto a real gurney. One of them, a young guy with kind eyes, paused long enough to ask me, "Ma'am, are you hurt? Is any of this blood yours?" I looked down at my sleeves, at Vanesa's bloody handprints, and shook my head. "No, I'm fine. Just take care of him." Not because I loved him anymore, but because I needed him alive for what came next. The police arrived 30 seconds later, and Vanesa immediately started talking. Word vomit, desperate, pathetic excuses pouring out of her mouth faster than she could think them through. "Officers, thank God you're here. This woman, she attacked her husband, she pushed him, and then she threatened me when I tried to help." She pointed at me with a shaking, blood-covered finger, and I actually felt sorry for her. Sorry that she was stupid enough to think that would work. The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, looked from Vanesa to me to Joy. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back and put your hands where I can see them." She was talking to Vanesa. Joy stepped forward, holding up her phone. "Officer, I have video evidence of everything. Dr. Rodriguez and the patient conspired to murder Mrs. Whitmore for financial gain. It's all recorded." The officer took Joy's phone, watched for maybe 30 seconds, and her expression hardened. "Dr. Vanesa Rodriguez, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and medical fraud." She read Vanesa her rights while another officer cuffed her, and Vanesa was screaming now, completely unhinged. "It was Daniel! It was all Daniel's idea! He seduced me, he manipulated me, I was in love with him, and he used me." The officer wasn't impressed. "You can explain that to the judge, ma'am." They led her away, still sobbing, still making excuses, and the sound of her voice fading down the corridor was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. One down, one to go. I followed the paramedics to the real ICU, the one with actual patients and beeping machines and nurses who weren't planning murders. They wheeled Daniel into a trauma bay, and I watched through the glass as a team of doctors worked on him. A neurosurgeon arrived, still in his scrubs from another surgery, and I saw him examining the scans they'd just taken, saw the way his face fell, saw him shake his head. He came out to talk to me 20 minutes later, and the expression on his face told me everything before he even spoke. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Dr. Patterson. I need to be very direct with you about your husband's condition." I nodded, bracing myself. "The fall caused a C1-C2 fracture. That's high cervical spine trauma. We've stabilized him. But..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He has what we call locked-in syndrome." I'd heard of it before, read about it in some medical article years ago. But hearing it applied to Daniel made my breath catch. What does that mean exactly? Dr. Patterson's voice was gentle but honest. "It means your husband is conscious. He can see, hear, and understand everything around him. But he's completely paralyzed from the neck down. He can't speak, can't move his limbs, can't even swallow or breathe on his own. He'll be on a ventilator indefinitely. The only muscles he has control over are his eyes. He can blink and move them up and down, but that's it." The words hung in the air between us. Daniel was trapped. Completely, utterly, permanently trapped inside his own body, aware of everything but able to do nothing. The irony hit me like a freight train. "Can he..." I had to clear my throat. "Can he understand what we're saying to him?" Dr. Patterson nodded. "Yes, his cognitive function is intact. He'll be fully aware of his condition, fully aware of his surroundings. Some patients with locked-in syndrome have lived for years, even decades, with proper care. Years, decades. Daniel could spend the rest of his life like this, conscious but imprisoned, watching the world go on without him, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything but exist. The man who'd planned to kill me so he could be free was now locked in the ultimate prison. And suddenly, standing there in that sterile hallway with the smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils, I understood what real karma looked like. It wasn't quick. It wasn't merciful. It was poetic. And it was absolutely, devastatingly perfect. They moved Daniel to a private room in the ICU 3 hours later, once he was stabilized enough to be monitored long-term. I watched them wheel him down the hallway, his body strapped to the bed, tubes coming out of his throat, machines doing the breathing his body couldn't do anymore. The nurses were kind, professional, treating him like any other patient who'd suffered a tragic accident. They had no idea what he'd tried to do. No idea that the only reason he was in this condition was because he'd been celebrating my planned murder. I followed at a distance, not ready to see him up close yet, not ready to look into those eyes that could still see me but could never speak to me again. The police had more questions, of course. They took my statement in a small consultation room while Joy sat beside me, backing up every word I said with her recording. The detective, a man named Morrison with tired eyes and a coffee-stained tie, listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When Joy played the audio of Daniel and Vanesa discussing my murder, planning the fake sedative, laughing about the Maserati they'd buy with my money, Morrison's jaw clenched. "Mrs. Whitmore, I want you to know that Dr. Rodriguez is being charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, medical fraud, and we're opening investigations into the 2 previous deaths she mentioned. Your husband..." He paused, clearly conflicted about Daniel's current state. "Given his condition, we'll be pursuing charges once he's medically able to participate in his own defense, though realistically, that may never happen." I signed more papers that night than I'd signed in my entire life. Insurance forms, police reports, medical consent forms, and then, the one that felt the heaviest, a document removing Daniel as my power of attorney, as the beneficiary of my estate, as my emergency contact. With each signature, I was erasing him from my life, piece by piece, until all that was left was a name on a marriage certificate I'd be dissolving as soon as legally possible. The hospital social worker, a kind woman named Patricia, sat with me while I signed. "Mrs. Whitmore, I know this is overwhelming. We have counselors available if you need someone to talk to." I looked up at her, and I must have looked half dead myself because her expression shifted to concern. "I'm okay," I lied. I need to see him, one last time." Patricia walked me to Daniel's room at midnight. The ICU was quieter then, just the rhythmic beeping of machines and the soft footsteps of night shift nurses. She opened the door for me, asked if I wanted her to stay, and I shook my head. "I need to do this alone." She nodded and closed the door behind me, leaving me in the dim room with the man who'd tried to kill me. Daniel was awake. Of course he was awake. Locked-in syndrome patients don't sleep much, Dr. Patterson had explained. The body's trapped, but the mind is running constantly, processing everything, unable to escape into unconsciousness. His eyes tracked me as I approached the bed, and I saw it immediately. The recognition, the fear. He knew. He knew I'd heard everything, seen everything, and he knew he couldn't explain, couldn't lie, couldn't talk his way out of this. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, studying his face. The face I'd loved for 3 years. The face that had smiled at me on our wedding day, that had kissed me goodnight 1,000 times, that had looked at me this morning with such cold indifference when I refused to give him money. He looked smaller now, vulnerable, human in a way he'd never seemed before. The ventilator hissed and clicked, breathing for him, keeping him alive against his will. "Daniel," I said quietly, and his eyes widened slightly, the only movement he could make. I know you can hear me. I know you understand everything I'm saying, so I'm only going to say this once." I leaned forward, making sure he could see my face clearly in the dim light. "I could have saved you, you know. When you fell, when you hit your head, I was right there, watching from the ventilation shaft. Joy wanted to call for help immediately, but I waited. I counted to 30 while you bled and seized on that floor, while Vanesa panicked, while your brain was dying from lack of oxygen. I waited because I wanted you to feel it, wanted you to understand what it meant to be helpless." His eyes were moving frantically now, up and down, the only protest he could manage. I continued, my voice steady and cold. The doctors say you could live like this for years, decades even. Fully conscious but completely paralyzed. Unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything but watch the world go on without you. Do you understand what that means, Daniel? You're going to spend the rest of your life as a prisoner in your own body. I stood up, smoothing my shirt, preparing to leave. I've already signed the papers removing you from my will, from my insurance, from everything. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow on grounds of attempted murder, so you won't see a penny of my father's money. The inheritance you killed our marriage for, it's gone. Vanesa's going to prison for 20 years minimum. And you? I paused at the door, looking back at him one last time. I'm transferring you to a state-run long-term care facility. Not the nice private one with the ocean view and the gourmet meals, the state one, where they're understaffed and overworked, and you'll be just another patient in a room with 3 other people. You'll get the care you need to stay alive. But you won't get comfort. You won't get peace. You'll get exactly what you deserve. His eyes were wide, pleading, desperate, and I felt absolutely nothing. Goodbye, Daniel. I hope you enjoy your very long life. I reached for the light switch and flipped it off, plunging the room into darkness. And then I walked out, closing the door behind me with a soft, final click. I walked out of St. Jude's Hospital at 2:47 a.m., and the storm had finally passed. The air was clean, cool, smelling like rain and new beginnings. My car was still parked crooked in the emergency lot where I'd abandoned it hours ago. Back when I thought I was racing to save my dying husband. Back when I still believed in us. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, not starting the engine, just breathing, processing, trying to understand how my life had gone from ordinary to absolutely insane in the span of one night. My phone buzzed with messages. Friends, family, people who'd heard about the accident and wanted to know if Daniel was okay. I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. I wasn't ready to explain that my husband had tried to kill me, that his mistress was a murderous doctor, that karma had intervened in the most brutal way possible. Joy had given me her number before I left, told me to call if I needed anything. You saved my life, I'd said to her, and she just smiled sadly. I've worked at St. Jude's for 30 years. I've seen Dr. Rodriguez operate before, always choosing the wealthiest patients, always pushing experimental procedures, always finding reasons why insurance wouldn't cover it. I suspected something was wrong, but I could never prove it, until tonight. She'd squeezed my hand. You were brave, Chloe. Not everyone could have stayed calm like you did. But I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left just a shell. The woman I'd been this morning, the one who still loved Daniel despite everything, who still believed in second chances. She was gone, dead, replaced by someone colder, harder, someone who could watch her husband suffer and feel nothing but satisfaction. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue that he couldn't participate in his own defense, that his condition made him incapable of understanding the proceedings. My lawyer, a brilliant woman named Helena, who'd handled everything pro bono after hearing my story, shut that down immediately. Mr. Whitmore has locked-in syndrome, Your Honor. He is fully cognitive and aware. He can communicate yes or no answers through eye blinks. He understands exactly what he did, and he understands the consequences. The judge agreed. Daniel got nothing. No settlement, no alimony, no access to my inheritance. Vanesa Rodriguez was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison after the FBI investigation uncovered not 2, but 4 previous insurance fraud murders. 4 families destroyed, 4 lives stolen, all for money. Daniel would spend the rest of his life in that state facility, and according to the nurses I occasionally checked in with, he was exactly as miserable as I'd hoped. I sold the house. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. I moved to a small coastal town 3 hours away, bought a cottage with a view of the ocean, and started over. Some days were good. Some days I woke up and forgot, just for a moment, that any of it had happened. And then I'd remember. The hospital corridor, the ventilation shaft, the sound of Daniel's skull hitting metal. Dr. Patterson had called me once, a few months after everything, to tell me that Daniel had tried to refuse his feeding tube, tried to essentially starve himself to death. "We can't let him, legally," Patterson explained, "but I thought you should know he's struggling." I'd thanked him for the update and hung up, and I felt nothing. Not sympathy, not guilt, just nothing. Maybe that made me a monster, or maybe it just made me human. They say karma is a bitch, but honestly, karma is an artist. It doesn't just punish, it creates poetry. Daniel wanted to fake his death to steal my life. Instead, he created a real living death for himself. Vanesa wanted to play God with people's lives. Now she's in a cell where she can't even control when the lights turn off. And me? I wanted justice. I wanted them to pay for what they tried to do. And watching them both get exactly what they deserved, that wasn't revenge. That was the universe finally balancing the scales. So here's what I learned. Be careful what you fake. Be careful what you plan. Because the universe is watching, and it has a twisted sense of humor. And sometimes, the karma you try to manufacture for someone else ends up finding you instead. But you know what's crazy? My story isn't even the worst betrayal I've heard. Because at least Daniel's plan failed. At least I survived. The next story I need to tell you, it's about a woman who came home one day to find her brand new Porsche just gone. Vanished. Her husband had given it to his mother as a gift so she could show off at church. Can you imagine? But when she called the police to report it stolen, they found something in the glove compartment. Documents. Mortgage papers. Proof that her husband and his mother had been secretly refinancing her house, stealing her equity, planning to leave her homeless and bankrupt. They tried to blackmail her into silence. Big mistake, because she didn't just get her car back. She orchestrated a meeting at the bank that ended with both of them in FBI custody for fraud. And the way she did it, pure genius. If you thought my story was satisfying, wait until you hear what she pulled off. Trust me. You're going to want to see this.